For the March board meeting of the Greater Richmond Transit Company. And I think because
Danny Smith, Chesterfield County.
who's up there?
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, Sid Kumar, PlanRVA.
Thanks. Dan Smith, Chesterfield, right?
George Braxton, City of Richmond.
Elvis Carlos, State of Richmond.
Ian Milliken, Chesterfield County.
Gary Armstrong, Chesterfield County.
Bonnie Ashley, General Counsel.
Cheryl Adams.
All righty.
Director of Risk Management, GRTC.
Adrian Torres, Chief Development Officer, GRTC.
Jonathan Carroll, Chief Financial Administrative Officer.
Rob Taggart.
PlanRVA.
Sam Singh, Director of Planning and Scheduling.
Tony Bird, Director of Maintenance, GRTC.
You're right.
All righty, let's see what happens here. We have, anybody to speak? No. So could we have a motion to approve the minutes of the board?
So move.
Second.
Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I'd like to take our closed session discussion of the financial, of the action items around the financial business, which is the second half of Roman numeral 6, and I'd like to move that up. Because some are going to have to leave early from the meetings. Everybody? All right, so we're going to need to move in the closed session, and that's page.
Board hold a closed meeting pursuant to section 2.2-3711A29 of the Code of Virginia to discuss the status and terms of a contract for enterprise resource planning and human resource system, because discussion in an open session would adversely affect GRTC's bargaining position.
All right, second for that?
Second.
So we go into closed session. Y'all know, who knows, everybody knows who's supposed to be here, right? Can I have a motion, please?
Yes, sir. Whereas the Board of Directors, GRTC, has convened in closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in
Excuse me
accordance
just a
with the
minute.
provisions.
Are we all right?
Yes, sir.
All right, say it again.
Whereas the Board of Directors of GRTC has convened in closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, one, only public matters lawfully exempt from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certifying resolution applies, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Whereas the following vote of the board members: Ben Campbell,
Yes.
George Braxton,
Yes.
Gary Armstrong,
Yes.
Eldridge Coles,
Yeah.
Danny Smith,
Yes.
and Ian Milliken, yes.
All right, thank you. That motion is passed. So before us, the possibility of a motion here to finalize negotiations with the top rated. Somebody want to make that?
Sure. Okay, it's recommended that the Board of Directors authorizes the CEO to finalize negotiations with the top-rated responsive bidder, and if acceptable terms are met, to execute an agreement with that provider for an ERP and HR software system for an amount not to exceed $5.1 million.
All right, let's have a second on that.
Second.
Okay, how about it? Are you guys ready for this?
Yes.
1.1 million over 5 years.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Do you accept that?
Yes.
5.1 million over 5 years. All right, any further conversation on this discussion? Recommendation?
All right.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your good work, staff, over a year and a half. And may this go through as we hope. So I asked that this meeting be in person because this is the last time this configuration of the board will ever be present. And I thought it'd be nice to at least see a half of your faces. I want to thank you for the work you've done. Express my excitement at the and so express my excitement at the achievement of this board of 6 people over the years. Gratitude to Chesterfield County for faithful even though it had no service, and also my gratitude to Chesterfield County for deciding to have service. And I think we're about to enter into a new period of great interest, which really looks at genuinely looks at public transit as a regional thing here for Metro Richmond. Be here next month, but I'll find out. Some of you will as well, and we'll see what happens. So thank you for this work, and really thank you for this work. Careful, solid work of public service here. Blessings to you, Mr. Coles, in this next couple of. So you gotta go? I'll let you go. Do you have anything you want to say to these people?
No, I got about 10 more minutes.
Okay.
My doctor's office about 5 minutes from here.
All righty, good. Well, I think we go back now to the agenda as laid out. And that means that we're going to move to the development and engagement. So,
Members of the board. Back at the February board meeting, I'm trying to restore service.
Excuse me, Sam, but is this mic live? Not, you need to come down here with.
Live?
Right now.
Okay. So I mentioned that for the May service board that'll begin May 1st, we wanted to restore frequency to the Pulse and Route 5. Those were our priorities. And in addition to that, to advance our commitments to the union in 3 key ways: to provide an early straight run on every route, to create more 20-minute meal breaks for our operators, and to have less than 30% of our runs be 10-hour runs. So through the scheduling process, we kind of discovered that looking at our projected staffing levels for May and kind of what we were coming up with trying to achieve all of these goals, we weren't quite able to hit all of it and still provide reliable service where we can actually run what we're scheduled to run. So we did make a lot of progress on achieving our commitments to the union. We did provide an early straight run on every route. We're able to create more 20-minute meal breaks, and we're getting a lot closer to having less than 30% of our scheduled runs be 10 hours. However, on the frequency side, we were able to restore 10-minute peak period service to the Pulse, but we were unable to provide 10-minute midday service to the Pulse, and we were unable to return the Route 5 to 15-minute service. However, for FY23, our goals are to meet all those union commitments and to restore the frequencies on Route 5, the rest of the Pulse, and all of our other routes that we operate. And that concludes my report.
And Sam, the issue here is the availability of staff, correct? Thanks very much for your report. Adams, right.
Yes, first up, we will have Mr. Tim Braun with the operations report.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board and everyone. Just wanted to give you a brief overview of the key performance indicators located starting on page 10 of your board packet. Just want to give you a few highlights. First, the on-time performance. We have seen some improvement in that area. We're just under 70% of on-time performance. We had been in the mid-60s for a while, but we are seeing some gradual growth in that area. Also, the absenteeism rate went down for February, under 14%, mainly due to fewer COVID cases and also fewer leave time with vacations and so forth. Lost trips, I think you'd be pleased with this number. We're in the thousands in terms of lost trips per month over the last few months. We were 340 trips lost for the month of February, which equated to about 99.26% of our service that operated. So we're almost back up to the levels that we were, over a year ago. So we continue to see some positive strides in that area as well. Specialized, still got a little work to do in that area, around 81% on-time performance. But one encouraging bit of news there is that they're have been experiencing the same challenges that we have as far as operators go. But they had a class last week with 7, 6 are still in that class. And they also have stepped up their recruiting efforts to try to get a steady flow of operators, which should improve their operation overall as well. Our current staffing, we're at 245 full-time and 22 part-time operators. We have a class of 7 that started in December that should be graduating here over the next few weeks. Also, January has a class of 7. You'll notice that 7 number will come up quite a bit. That class will be graduating sometime in April. And then our February class that started February 28th, also a class of 7. So we're encouraged there. And with a class start yesterday, started with 7, but actually 6 showed up. So, but we are continuing with our classes, monthly classes, to continue that recruitment And as Sam said, as we get more operators in, we're able to increase the service delivery for our customers. The on-demand pilot program that we started in December, late December, I mentioned last month we had about 3 trips that operated with that service. We had 31 trips that operated in the month of February to help offset some of that shortage that we had in the service from late night, early morning. So some of the folks have started to take advantage of that. We'll continue that for the next few months as we continue to get more service into the area. And you may have heard also in the news about the federal mask mandate continuing into April 18th. So it was extended for 1 more month as the CDC continues to look at the guidelines and make adjustments and so forth. We of course will follow the federal mandate as well going into April. Unless there are any more questions, that concludes my report.
That's very good news, Mr. Barham. Thank you so much.
Next up with ridership report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Unfortunately, my numbers aren't all 7s, so I'm gonna have to look at my cheat sheet while I give you the rundown here. So, looking at our fixed route ridership for February, if we look at just local fixed route, that was at 473,953. This is on page 23 of your packet, if you wanna read along. So that's up almost 5% from January. If we look year over year, February of 21, it's up 16%. And if we go back and look pre-COVID at February of 2019, we're only down 3.8%. So we're running pretty close to even, which is, except for January, a trend that we've been seeing for a few months now. Looking at the Pulse service, that was at 117,888 for the month of February. That represents a 6% increase over January and a nearly 30% increase year over year. Looking back to pre-COVID though, we're down about 30%. So, not quite back up where we were before, but we've definitely made a lot of progress in getting it back up. And hopefully with adding frequency back, we'll see that number go up starting in May. Looking at the express routes, those were just under 5,000 for the month at 4,854 trips. That represents a 33.8% increase over January and a 15% decrease year over year. Looking back to pre-COVID, the express routes are down about 81%. If we kind of change gears and look at the paratransit, the CARES CARE service, that's at 24,226 for the month of February. That's an 8% increase month over month, 40, almost 50% increase year over year. So paratransit's back in a big way. And we're down only 1% from pre-COVID numbers. So paratransit is also back. If we turn and look to Vanpool, fiscal year to date, we're at 65,719. That represents a year over year decrease of about 3%. And looking pre-COVID, that's about 71% down. So if there are no other questions, that concludes my report.
Okay, yeah, just what are we hypothesizing as work? Is it the great resignation? Numbers have always been about, people going, has been where a lot of our numbers come from. No, people are still going to work somehow. I mean, what are we thinking? So that was the 30%, right? The pulse was the 30%. So is it, since that is probably has more choice riders, that you think it's telework?
I mean, that could certainly be part of it.
Is VCU still, are they fully back?
VCU's back.
Fully in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
May I jump in?
Yeah, Jill.
Sure.
Thanks, Sam.
Sam,
Oh,
welcome to GRTC. It's my first time meeting you. I hope that you will enjoy your.
Thank you, sir.
you.
Take care. Nice meeting you.
Take care, Aldridge.
All right.
I'll give you a call.
Keep us up, man.
Thank you,
All right.
Sam. Next up, we'll have
Thank
Tony
you,
Carter
Hollywood.
with safety performance.
Morning, Reverend Campbell, members of the board. I'll be going over the safety performance report for the month of February. This will be found on page 25 through 27 of the board package. Now with the results for this month. External events. In January, if you remember, we had 23. In February, we had 48. Non-preventable incidents. In January, we had 17. In February, we had 29. Preventable. In January, we had 5. In February, we had 19. And we had 3 rear-end accidents in the month of February. Now, I can tell by the grunts that I heard, you noticed the significant increase in the numbers. What we did was we went back and did a breakdown. Wanted to see what was attributing to the increase in the numbers so far as preventable accidents and non-preventable accidents. When it came to preventable accidents, we noticed that there was a huge increase in hit and run type accidents. Basically, we had a lot of vehicles sideswiping buses, leaving the scene, rear end type accidents and leaving the scene. And we're working with RPD because we noticed there was a concentration of Richmond City, working with RPD to try to find out those individuals and get some information on them. When it came to preventable type accidents, it was fixed objects. Buses going by, mirrors hitting poles, construction sites. There's a lot of construction going on in the city and surrounding areas. What we're doing is we're making all calls out on the radio, as well as training department has individuals out on the street, reminding those individuals, those operators, to be aware of their surroundings. Take your time. Make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do to keep everybody as safe as possible. We also noticed that there was a slight increase in passenger type accidents. That was both on the preventable and non-preventable side. From the non-preventable side, it was situations where people were just falling on the buses, slipping out of their seats, that type of thing. Preventable accidents, we did notice that there was a couple accidents where operators weren't properly curbing the buses. Things that we can work on so far as reminding what they've learned in training to be as safe as possible. Moving on to specialized care. Passenger events, we had 0. Traffic events, we had 5. Preventable were 4, and non-preventable were 1. And they were minor accidents. The preventable were fixed object type accidents. Assaults on fixed route, verbal, we did have 1 verbal confrontation between the passenger and the operator. And then we had 3 situations where more or less it was offensive language used. We did have 2 physical assaults. None of them involved the actual operator and passenger. Both of them were between passengers. And on the care side, we did have 1 verbal altercation between the operator and a passenger, and no physical. As you can see, like I said, the numbers did increase, and we're working strenuously with the training department to come up with ways to get out there and be more present. If you remember, we did add 2 positions to the training department, our coach trainer positions. And they're doing an excellent job of getting out and being present, doing ride-alongs with the operators, monitoring the operations so far as what the safety of the operators can be, improved and what they can do to improve it. We get feedbacks on a weekly basis of what they're noticing. We're communicating that out and coming up with ways to improve our safety and bring a recognition to how important it is to be as safe as you possibly can. As well, we're pushing online training. We have de-escalation training online at this point, as well as driving safety tips. And we're working on the in-person safety meetings that will be coming up next month in cooperation with RPD, just to remind us, again, of those safety tips and things you can do to keep everybody as safe as possible. And if there are no questions, that concludes the safety performance report for the month of February.
And looking at the number of increased accidents, I also had Tony take a look at the years of service for the operators to see, was there a pattern? Because we've had so many new operators. And believe it or not, there wasn't a pattern. It didn't, I was thinking it was gonna lean towards our newer operators because they were so new, but it's a combination of new versus experienced operators. So it is something that we are focusing on and that we will continue to monitor.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
And our last discussion item is our maintenance report, Mr. Tony Bird.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I have a maintenance report as found on page 28 in the board packet. Our KPIs for the month of February were 6,783 miles between roll calls. We've exceeded our new personal goal, which is 6,500 miles. As for previous months, our miles between roll calls were in November, 7,202, December, 11,392, and January, 7,767. Our PMs for the month of February were right at 95% with a goal of 80%. With the continuing ongoing pandemic, the parts supply chain had been very slow and pushed back on shipping as many parts as we needed with manufacturers. However, our parts department worked very hard to get us as many parts on hand as they could to help us cut down on our out of service time. Currently, 22% of the fleet is down for service with a 30% ratio. We've hired with a 30% spare ratio, I'm sorry. We've hired one more technician and we're looking forward to his support and good work with our workflow. Last month, I reported that we have 5 new mechanics. We were 5 mechanics short. We're currently 5 mechanics short, 7 body shop techs short, 1 general utilities, 1 foreman, and 1 facilities manager in the maintenance department. We continue to disinfect the entire fleet daily, and we also power wash our bus stops daily. That ends the maintenance report.
Thank you.
And we have interviews set up next week for mechanics.
And
so-
today.
And so we're really hoping that those numbers will be down next month.
Great.
Hey, real quick, if we've got 15 vacancies right now, what percentage of your staff is available? I guess it seems like a lot of vacancies, so it's definitely good that you are able to keep as many buses still on the roads as you can with that few people.
Well, currently we have 5 mechanics on each shift, first and second and third shift. So we're maintaining that way.
Okay.
In overtime.
And yeah, a
Gotcha.
lot of overtime.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Action item for the Clever Device software maintenance renewal.
Morning, Mr. Chair, morning, board members. So March of last year, the board authorized the CEO to issue a purchase order to Clever Devices for our annual software, hardware maintenance renewal. It's that time again. So just as a recap real quick, Clever Devices is our onboard bus computer system that provides real-time location, passenger information to our mobile app. It's our operations software that runs in dispatch. Basically, it's the heart of our system on our vehicles. It's once again time to do the annual software and hardware maintenance renewal. The vehicle count is remaining at 143. The software or the renewal is priced based on active fleet, fleet size vehicles, not with our contingency fleet. The software does cover all the software maintenance, the support that we call on for service support updates, as well as all the warranty on the hardware. It is a 5% increase over last year. It is fully funded by federal, state, and local funds. And the recommendation is that the board of directors authorize the CEO to enter into a 1-year software maintenance and an extended hardware support agreement with Clever Devices and issue a purchase order for $243,335.56.
Motion.
Operations maintenance. John is coming up next.
Morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board.
Morning.
I'm going to call your attention to the finance presentation, which starts on page 31 and goes through page 51. So jumping right into the mix here on slide 32, the source of funds or the revenue section here for the 7 months ended January 31st, 2022. Revenues are unfavorable to budget in the amount of 3.88 million on a budget of 36.88 for a shortfall of about 10.52%. Very similar to the prior month's briefing, the majority of the deficit or the shortfall is in the federal funds, which is, as you can see, about a third of the way up from the bottom, is unfavorable versus budget, an amount of $3.85 million on a budget of 9.1 million, and that's basically the result of operating expenses being below budget to the tune of 3.59 million, as most of the federal funds are reimbursement basis. If we're not spending the money, we're not reimbursing. So as you look at the other lines in the source of funds, the directly generated funds are favorable about $14,000 on a budget of 1.49 million, and this is basically our advertising revenue being favorable versus budget about 146,000, and that's being offset by the university pass revenue. The month of July, as you recall, was still discounted due to COVID ridership, and then we expanded a little bit on that, and that's basically due to the frequency lack. So we're not invoicing the incentive for the month of January for that portion. Local government funds are just slightly favorable to budget by about 19,000 on a budget of 18.83 million, and state funds are on budget contribution amount at 7.18. So calling over just in there, we're not going to look at it because it's the eye chart, but slide 34 is the eye chart of the operating expenses. We're going to focus on slides 35 and 36, which are the summary of the operating expenses. As I mentioned before, the operating expenses for 7 months are below budget by the amount of 3.59 million. So on the top of slide 35, you can see that the largest contributor to the expenses being below budget is our labor portion, which is $2.36 million on a budget of 24.89. As you're well aware, the staffing levels in maintenance and our operators are lower than what the budgeted headcounts were. Vehicle operations is contributing 879,000 of the labor variance, and that's due to the operator salaries and wages of 747,000, supervision about 91,000, and fringe benefits 194,000. This report's as of January. As of January, there were 10 positions that were vacant versus the budget of 331. In the vehicle maintenance and facility maintenance departments, counts about 514,000 of the labor variance. Once again, maintenance, the head count in maintenance is below budget levels, generating a budget being below the actual being below budget by 378,000 and about correlating 176,000 in fringe. And that's, as Mr. Bird had just briefed, about 16 positions on vacant on a budget of 77 in maintenance. Similarly, general administration is around 962,000 of labor variance, which 439,000 is actual salaries and wages below budgeted levels, and the remaining variance is 523 is on the fringe, and this is just due to vacant positions relative to the budget. Other contributing members, about halfway down the page on 35, services is favorable about $535,000 versus budget, and that's basically the building maintenance and computer maintenance. Some of it's timing, some of them are projects that we have not undertaken. A little further down at the bottom of the page, materials and services consumed is favorable versus budget, about 27,500. It's favorable equipment and supplies relative to budget, slightly offset by for the month was unfavorable fuels and parts. Some of that's timing, some of that is just the volume on the fuels. Our fuel contract is locked in for diesel through the end of September. So we're not really seeing any of this current price fluctuations in there. So we're locked in. We do have an IFB that will be on the street for October going forward. So the unfavorable variance year to date is probably just the amount of deliveries received versus what was budgeted and anticipated. Not a concern there at the moment. So So going on to page 36, you'll see that the casualties and liability costs versus budget are favorable to 418,000. That's the recurring as the trend is when the budget was put together. We were not we had not been participating in the Virginia liability pool. So this is just the continued effect of as the budget is calendarized throughout the year, showing the full savings. And purchase transportation is favorable, about 335,000 due to less demand for service. Next to call attention, I'll hop over to slide 48, which is the combined income statement. And the highlights on that, the operating revenue is favorable to budget by $35,000 roughly on a budget of 1.37. And that's where you see the favorable advertising revenue offset by the VCU adjustments. Other income is unfavorable to budget by 85,000 and change. And that's basically due to the lower budgeted interest income that is being resolved in the 2023 budget. As we mentioned before, operating contributions are unfavorable. That's kind of in the middle of the page there towards the right, 3.83 million versus budget due to the operating spending being below the budget by 3.59 million. You'll see that 3.598 million. And as for the reasons, it's basically 2.36 million in labor, 535,000 in services, and $335,000 in purchase transportation, and then casualty liability of 418. So when you go down by the operating, the departments, equipment and facility maintenance, that favorable performance or below budget performance is due to the budgeted labor expenses being below budget, and as well as the services and materials favorability. Transportation is below budget in expenditures, and that's just a function of the head count. The planning services, planning, scheduling, and marketing is just due to the timing of advertising expenses and recruiting campaign versus the consultancies versus where it was calendarized. General administrative, the $1 million favorable performance is basically due to the vacancies. The insurance and safety is the aforementioned Virginia liability pool, and the purchase of services due to demand. So that's, all in all, as we have booked the revenue, change in position year to date, about $100,000 favorable. No concerns there. Probably we'll see this trend continue through the remaining portion of fiscal 22.
What's the CARES Act, Renee, about?
Excuse me, the
CARES Act, not received, what is that? Operating contributions, CARES Act.
yes, on the line for the month.
Yeah.
For the month of, okay, that's for the month of this is January. We utilized in the federal reimbursement, it was for PM and ADA off the 5307 flex. The CRISA grant was being programmed, so the CRISA grant was not, the federal CARES Act grants were not drawn down on in the month of January. Moving over to slide 49, it's the GRTC balance sheet as of January 31st, 2022. Very similar to prior month's comments, as you can see here. It's a continued strengthening of the balance sheet when compared to the column on the far right, which is prior year end, which is June 30th of 2021. Cash position is up. Accounts receivable balances are down, so cash is up to 11.7 million versus year end of 2.3 million. That's kind of a operating cycle aspect, as well as the real accounts receivable being down. Pretty much, the other call outs, as you can see here, the restricted funds for CVTA and the other assets, and then as well as the deferred revenues in the liability section of CVTA. That's the continued collection of the 15% fund from CVTA, and I can show the details in a couple slides of that. No concerns on the balance sheet. So moving over to slide 50, it's the cash flow statement. This is basically showing the actual end of January, had a positive cash position of $8.4 million. And then it kind of went down to a low point of 650,000 at the end of February. And that's primarily due to, as you can see in the upper part of the February, the vehicle purchases are buses that we received. We ended up, some of the receipts came in January, creating the artificially high balance, and then we paid the vendor in the month of February. No concerns there. We are following our typical High balance at the beginning of the quarter when we bring in the CVTA funds, and as well as we start collecting the funds from the operating contributions, and then it goes down towards the end of the quarter. Moving over to slide 51. This is the work in process CVTA special fund quarterly report. As you're aware that we have a quarterly reporting obligation. So this is the quarterly report for the period ending March 31st, 2022, updated through the actual data through February 28, 2022. As you can see on the top, in the month of January, we received 2.58 million. February's receipts of 2.9 million. And then you can see that there was, the LGIP, as the market has been very volatile, there's some unrealized gains and losses as well as dividend income in there. We didn't have any uses for the funds for preparing the regional public transportation plan. We'll probably see some invoices in March and in the April timeframe. And then you'll be reflecting there on the bottom is the third quarter operating expense draw as well as the local share of the capital draw coming from CVTA. So right now at the end of February, the rolling balance towards March 31st is a fund balance of 21.5 million, of which, as you look down on the bottom of the page, we have 18.2 million invested in the LGIP extended maturity with $3.25 million in the Wells Fargo account. The majority of that $3.2 million will be transitioned into GRTC operating bank accounts April 1st for the fourth quarter funding of GRTC operating. With that, that concludes my finance update, and I'll take any questions if there are any.
Any questions?
Just real quick, John, I'm sure it's been too recent to figure out the impact, but with the spikes in gas, if people start driving less and buy less gas, I guess that will impact our CVTA funds we get from CVTA.
Yeah, to some extent, I think that the majority of the funds that come in are probably driven off the sales
Okay.
tax, and of the two buckets, it's the larger bucket.
Okay.
Yeah, there could be some impact due to the less demand and for driving.
Gotcha.
But the tax is based on the price of gas too, right?
It is
Yeah,
right.
It's a percentage of the price.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, so
So if it goes up, yeah,
it
it
goes up,
offsets.
we still get, yeah.
Yep. Sense.
Right side.
Yep. There you go. There you go. That's great. I just want to make sure that there wasn't a scenario where we would be losing revenue, but also getting an increase in customer base because of the high price of gas. It's a unique position to be in.
Thank you, sir.
We have Ms. Thompson for recent and upcoming procurements.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm going to round it up for staff for you. I wanted to start my report with an update on some of the procurements I mentioned to you back in February. The procurement for paratransit services posted on February 25th. We held our pre-proposal meeting last Friday, March 11th, and proposals are due April 25th prior to 3 p.m. Next, the invitation for bids for construction services of the temporary transfer center was issued on March 2nd. The pre-bid meeting was held yesterday, March 14th, and bids are due April 4th prior to 3 p.m. Lastly, the statement of qualifications for construction management, engineering, and inspection services, which has been added to this month's upcoming procurements report, is scheduled to be issued today, March 15th, with a pre-proposal meeting to be held March 22nd at 11 a.m. and a due date of April 11th prior to 3 p.m. In addition to working on those procurements, we have added 4 other projects to this month's report. On page 53 of your board packet, you will see 2 new projects coming out of the facilities department. The first one is for upgrades to our HVAC system. The current software used to control the system is now obsolete and no longer supported. Facilities would like to upgrade the software and the controls in order to keep the system in good working condition. Staff estimates the cost of these upgrades to be approximately $62,000. The funding for this project is existing And our plan is to seek approval within the next month. Facilities has also identified the need to replace a bus lift in the maintenance department. The estimated cost of replacement, which includes the purchase of the lift and installation, is approximately $198,000. The funding was approved in the FY22 budget, and our plan is to bring the board a recommendation to award this summer. Procurement will also be issuing 2 additional solicitations for on-call architectural and engineering services and on-call general planning consulting services for possible award this summer. The exact budget for these services is still under consideration, as we are still planning to bring, while we're planning to bring the board award recommendations this summer, we are still looking into which projects are going to be in need of these services throughout a 7-year period. So some of the projects do have existing funding, and then some are in the planning stages. Are there any questions for me at this time?
On-call architecture and engineering.
A&E services for design services for, let's see, articulated station modifications, bus shelter and pad work, 23rd and Franklin relocation. So there's a number of projects coming down the pipeline that will need A&E services that planning has identified.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Action items, some more action items, right?
No, those are the ones we moved up.
Hmm?
That's
Oh, that's what we did already.
Yes. To the
Oh, now it's, anything else before Julie?
Julie?
Julie, you're up.
My comments. As Say federal mask mandate is lifted. Like gas prices, the majority of our fleet is CNG. Also, the question entire year CDTA dollars. to stand closer together. That space is extended up here. Wear your masks because you will be standing shoulder to shoulder on our buses moving forward. Joe and I, as I mentioned, legislative conference right now. I will bring more of that information back to the board and to staff when I return, but just a quick discussions nationally about the work. Region, and we'll have to back that up. Appreciation pay. We have been holding that. Likely that will go out in July so that we can look at the entire working year cap. Incredibly well, and whether or not she was become beloved by the
Thank you, and thank you for going to APTA. Really, it's exciting to hear what's going on there, and I think we look forward to a full report. Yes, Carrie's not here, right?
No.
All right.
She
Carrie,
was not able to attend.
all right, Carrie, we love you, and I am really grateful. Spirit and your encouraging presence. So it's my report, and the main thing, of course, that I have to do is to invite you all to ratify the proposed new bylaws. By the boards of supervisors of the 3 jurisdictions, Richmond, Henrico, and Chester. Position. It's a 9-member board rather than a 6-member board, and the voting compromise that has been worked out is 2 of the 3 members of each of the 3 jurisdictions. Mention is that as these, assuming we do ratify these bylaws, that the stockholders meeting occur just before the next board meeting. And 3 members from each of the existing owners and the 3 members of Henrico presented to them. Next meeting. And when is it? April something?
April 19th.
19th. So April 19th would be D-Day for the beginning of the new. Does anybody have any questions? How about a motion for this? So it's been moved to go. We approve the new bylaws as presented here and agreed to.
That's okay.
Go ahead. Okay. So Gary's moved it, George is seconded. Go for it, Ian.
I guess looking back, I'm a little bit of a history buff. I got a minor in history at Virginia Tech. So I do consider this to be pretty historical. This will be the first change in board leadership since 1989. So when I was running around Ruby's Elementary School as a kindergartner. So it's been a long time with this board. I've been on this board and had the pleasure of serving for Chesterfield for the past 3.5 years. So I kind of look back at just the 3.5 years and how much we've accomplished since that point in time. We optimized so the Pulse came on board less than 4 years ago on June 24th, 2018. So it's kind of amazing. We've had this huge BRT in place less than 4 years. We optimized all of the routes to improve performance at that point in time. We negotiated the ridership contract with VCU. We've hired a dynamic CEO. We've revamped the funding structure to augment the local contributions with a dedicated and guaranteed funding source for the first time in the history of GRTC. That's actually codified in the Code of Virginia. So I think that's pretty monumentous. We renegotiated union contracts. And then of course, in 2020, we removed fares at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our staff persevered. We implemented safety measures and kept all of the routes running as our essential employees, so other essential employees could get to and from their jobs throughout the pandemic. We mourned as many of our frontline workers experienced COVID-19, and we lost operator John Thrower to COVID-19 back in 2020. And then we celebrated as RideFinders racked up a lot of awards, and GRTC was named Employer of the Year by WTS Central Virginia Chapter 2021. So I look back at those 4 years, I think of how much we've accomplished as a board of 6. And I'm really excited to see how much we can accomplish in the next 4 years as a board of 9. So I definitely welcome Henrico onto our board and look forward to working with them in the future.
Beautiful work, Ian. Kind of list here, in addition to the pulse and the redrawing of the routes and all, it's an exciting time. I'm excited about, just as COVID began, we ran down the highway formerly known as Jeff Davis to the college formerly known as John Tyler. Short pump, which was long desired by the community. Very positive spirit.
You know, I thought about a lot of things, but as someone who essentially is a professional change agent, you know, is always good. It's just not always good for everybody. You know, we're definitely and I think some growing pains. It's always the case whenever there's even just a new board member that comes on. Now a whole new entity is coming on. But, you know, so there will be some growing pains, but I believe that this is the direction that we've always wanted to see this go. This is the growth that, and, you know, I look forward to, you know, what happens with GRTC as we move, as we begin to move as a complete region. Think about the why of Chesterfield being with us. Have been to the growth and advancement. And you know, I just think best of GRTC for the PlanRVA. So citizen, as a Richmond resident, I'm really excited to see what goes.
Thank you, George. Danny, you've been here 29 years?
Maybe, I'm not sure how many years. But it's exciting, you know, as we talk about what we discussed there the past few minutes. We're reflecting back on when I first came on the board, and you know, 45-minute meetings, and went on our way. But we now have an opportunity to see exactly the inner workings of what we do as a bus system. And to me, that's gratifying, because to me, that's what helps us make the good decisions. And we've been excellent, have excellent staff. It's continuing to improve, I guess, in the sense of the quality of the staff. Not that there's any negative part, but it's exciting to see that where we are, where we're going now, and have go and what that will bring to us, and to further grow.
Great, thank you. It's been pointed out to me that we need to be very specific about. Read it. The Board of Directors approves all proposed amendments to their articles of corporation bylaws as attached to have an effective date of April 19, 2020. Staff to file the amended and approved bylaws and articles with the SCC with that same effective date, and that shareholders on April 19th, 2022 to elect individuals appointed by the County of Henrico and to elect existing delegation to the motion. That's your second. Any further conversation? All in favor of this motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion's passed. Thank you very much. And I don't have anything else to say, except bless you guys. Thanks for good work. And Julie had fun up there in the nation's capital. Thanks to